We're going to get started here. So I am Adam Rauch, co-founder of LabKey and VP of Product Strategy here. And echoing Michael's introduction, I just want to say how happy I am to see all of you here and catch up with old friends and meet some new people and hear about your research, what you've been doing for the last year, and how you've been using LabKey, what's been working, what's not been working. And so we're, as Michael said, this is always one of the most exciting times of the year for us. For me, for all of our employees, all of our new employees are here, learning from you, seeing how the world uses LabKey, and we love to hear that, and we love all the feedback. So keep that coming. All right, so this is the time of the evening where I attempt to cram a year's worth of work by 45 employees and next year's worth of work of 45 employees into a 15-minute presentation. So I'll do my best. Sometimes it goes teensy bit over. Not this time, though. So I generally talk about a lot of features. You'll see I have a lot of features that I'll talk about. I've only picked the best ones. There's so many features. But I'm going to start with some non-features. I'm going to talk about a little bit about some big investments we made in our processes, in our development process, and how that will actually impact you, how that will benefit you, in fact. So you may have heard of some of these in various emails and communications we've done, but starting with, but the whole goal of these, one goal here, really, to make us more efficient, to be able to deliver higher quality code faster to you. So when you make your requests, we can respond to those more quickly. We come out with more reliable, better code. That's really our goal here with all three of these, and they kind of fit together and help each other out. So the first one was this migration from Subversion to Git. We are nearly there. So I look back at the code base exactly 1 year ago, and we have moved, as it says here, 98% of the Java code that was there a year ago is now gone. It's in Git. It's not actually gone. It's in Git. It's out of Subversion in Git. So you might wonder, why do you care about this? Well, really, this helps us improve code quality and reliability, faster iteration, et cetera, not because there's nothing magical about Git. It's just that there's kind of one little feature there that we're taking advantage of. Git gives us the ability to create and switch branches very, very quickly. So very low-cost branching technology gives us the ability to implement a feature branch workflow, and implement it we have totally across the board. So at this point, unlike previously, a year ago with Subversion and everything, at this point, every single change, whether it's a tiny little bug fix or a monetize enhancement or a huge refactor to the whole code base, that is developed in a feature branch. So in isolation in a feature branch, it is developed, maybe it's developed by one person, maybe it's developed by 5 or even 10 people by a big subgroup. They all share it, they work on it. It's developed, it's code reviewed, it's tested on a feature branch before it gets merged back into the main line. And in fact, all of our automated tests can be run on that feature branch. So before we merge it in, we know all the tests pass, or at least a large subset of those tests, the ones that we've configured. And these feature branches can last for, in some cases, minutes, days, weeks, months, whatever we need. And we can make sure that code is good and stable before it gets merged in the mainstream. And that's pretty important for this whole idea of reliability. So we've also moved our development methodology from Scrum to Kanban. Both agile methodologies, a lot of similarities, but really what Kanban gives us is the ability to move faster, to iterate faster. It focuses on smaller stories. So in the past, we'd had a big story. Now we might divide it up into a planning story, a development story, a testing story, 3 separate stories. We get through those quickly. The process and our daily stand-ups and these other things we do are all geared at getting those stories done, complete, and off the board, and getting on to the next one to allow us to kind of move faster. It also allows us, when you make a request, previously with our month-long sprints in our Scrum process, it might take a month and a half, 2 months for one of your requests to actually make it to the board. Now, concrete example, I just got approval this morning for a new feature. The client said, yes, go ahead. And we put that on the board today. So we can start working on that. I probably won't work on it today, but tomorrow or maybe Monday. But if I weren't here, I'd be working on that story. So also, we've switched from this idea of unversioned patch releases or hotfix releases. It's what we did about a year ago and before. We'd come out with, let's say, 18.2, and then we'd say a few weeks later, hey, here's 18.2 again with some bug fixes. And then 3 weeks later, here's 18.2 again. And we had a version number in there, an SVN revision or something like that. But it wasn't clear, well, exactly what were you getting and when was the next one going to come out. So now we switched to official maintenance releases. These are scheduled. They are numbered. 19.2.5, for instance, is the one that came out last week. They're documented with release notes and lists of issues that we've addressed, so that you can look at these and say, does this apply to me? Do I need any of these fixes? Do I want any of these new features? It's also allowed us, in some certain cases, isolated cases, not across the board, but we can put features into these maintenance releases more easily, kind of combining the use of Git and the fact that we have these maintenance releases. That all kind of allows us to produce things like secure ODBC in a point release. All right, so I promised some features. Yes, we developed a whole lot of features. So first, focusing on Community Edition features, lots of new capabilities into Community Edition. I'm just going to touch on a few of these. Improvements to charting. It's always frequently requested. You'll hear about Sample Manager in just a minute from Hannah. But a lot of the improvements, and you'll see this common theme, there are a couple of these examples where the development we've done in our products, like biologics and Sample Manager, those improvements filter back into the Community Edition and into the Premium Editions as well, because these products are built on top of the platform. So sample set improvements, performance improvements, user interface improvements in that whole arena. All of that is improved and is present in the Community Edition. We have a couple of improvements to our APIs, our domain APIs, so that you can create and edit and delete the structures of data sets and lists and other domains, right, which are kind of our table definitions. Whole bunch of improvements on the security side of things. So we had some of our newest crack developers working on CSRF protection and HTML filtering. So Israel and Rosalind, so you're smiling back there. And this is an example of, again, just going back to the process with feature branches. So this is a case where these developers could work on and improve this particular area, and then I or Josh or Carl or someone else is performing code reviews, and we go back and forth until the code is the way it should be. And I learn from that process, and they learn from that process, and it's really a way that we build institutional memory and best practices at the company. So love that feature branch workflow. Bunch of performance improvements, and my favorite #1 Community Edition feature new in 19.3 is a finally new React-based field designer. And so many of you have seen and maybe you love the GWT-based domain designer or field designer. It will soon be gone, replaced with something more like this. It's React, it's modern UI. Just giving a screenshot doesn't really do it justice, but a couple of features like searching fields. So you have 100 fields in your data set, type a couple of letters in there, immediately folds down to the 5 fields that match that, and you can just edit those and then delete it, and they all come back. Also, we have the way we handle advanced properties, just a pop-up with those advanced properties. Much easier, cleaner UI, more modern UI, and it gives us the ability to improve this over time with new features. We've sort of been a little stuck in that previous UI because it's based in GWT. It was hard to develop, hard to debug. We're moving forward. So this will be there in 19.3 for the assay designer, for sample sets, for user properties, study properties, some other, a few other things. Not for everything quite yet. That'll come in the next rev, like lists and data sets. That'll come, I promise. You're going to love this, promise. All right, so premium editions. So some of the features available to our premium edition subscribers, new over the last year or so. Again, some security-related things with antivirus scanning, improvements to file watchers and Amazon S3, thanks to the cost lab on that one. Synchronization with LDAP groups and users, and now, soon, the ability to have multiple LDAP servers, multiple CAS single sign-on configurations, multiple SAML configurations. Pretty important for a small set of institutions, but if you've got multiple organizations or multiple LDAP servers, this is something that's going to be very, very helpful to you. We made a bunch of improvements to our NLP pipeline. You heard some of them from Vincent, City of Hope, but you can compare. So our NLP pipeline and curation UI, you can now, over the last year or so, you can compare results. So you have results coming in from an NLP engine. You want to compare those with human curated results, and maybe you've got a second NLP engine. You can compare those all side by side, reconcile the results, choose the one that you think is correct. We have integration with Lingomatics, and then more sophisticated conditional logic that we've added. Bunch of improvements with R Studio, sandboxing, offloading of work from R, Shiny support within R Studio. And then, I had to debate on these last two, which one was my absolute favorite. But Sample Manager won out. That's right, Hannah, it won out. But we did add, and I really do like the ability to analyze data in a wide variety of external tools connecting via ODBC. So we have a few listed here that we have tested with, that we have kind of certified. We have some of our friends, especially from the PRCs, who have used this and have used it with other clients and said, hey, it also works with this, this, and this, and this, which is great to see. So this is going to be a super useful feature for these external analyses. All right, so as I look in my crystal ball, first of all, the things that we implement, everything I talked about so far and everything we're doing in the future is based on feedback that you give us. You tell us what you need, what's working, what's not working well. So doing it here and doing it, talking to your technical account manager and other forums, we collect this information and we feed it back into the product. So that's statement number one, is keep giving us that feedback. But as we met in a lot of these roundtables, as we've heard your feedback over the years, these are the areas where I think we're going to be making significant investments. We're going to finish up some of these migrations in terms of that new field designer. GWT designer will be gone. Subversion will be gone. We're going to, we made a lot of investment in the user experience in the way of that field designer. We're going to expand from that and improve import workflows and administration UI. We had a bunch of two lively conversations about precision medicine and some of the things we can do there, and whether it's hierarchical lookups or what have you. These are needs that you have, and we're going to be looking at that over the next year or so and implementing those. Lot of pieces, a lot of features in the area of data provenance. A lot of interest there, a lot of funding there in terms of a couple of our bigger clients are very interested in lineage of row-level lineage and capturing metadata about workflows and transformations. Kevin Encore can give you lots of details on that. Developer improvements in terms of query management and tracking of dependencies of queries so that you know what's going to happen if you delete a query, for instance. We've heard that as a strong need. And then in general, versioning of resources, module resources of all kinds via Git or other other mechanisms to make the development process a lot easier. Python is becoming more and more popular with our clients. You know, we've obviously made lots of investments in the past in R. Python is being used more and more, and so we're going to improve those areas. Other integrations, we are, you know, we're talking with folks about a number of different additional integrations. We do it, you know, every year we add more integrations, and that won't end. And then, as I said kind of up front, you know, those product investments that we're doing, we're making huge investments there, and those investments always improve the platform. So I talked about LabKey Server, the platform, right? This underlies all of the work that we do, all of our other products and everything else, but we have a whole bunch of other offerings. I don't have time to say a lot about all of these things, but we do, as Michael mentioned or he touched on, we have a compliant hosting offering. So we offer, you know, if you want to deploy LabKey yourself in your own data center, that's fine. If you want to deploy it in AWS or some other cloud environment, that's great. If you want LabKey to deploy that for you and manage that deployment, we're happy to do that. We have compliant and non-compliant hosting. In the case of compliant hosting, for instance, HIPAA, FISMA, Part 11 compliant hosting, we do that for a couple of organizations, including the FDA for the FDA My Studies project. So we host an instance of this whole environment in AWS on behalf of the FDA. So FDA My Studies is a system to securely, well, it's a secure, scalable, multi-tenant system for collecting data for IRB-approved observational studies and clinical trials via mobile applications. The FDA funded the whole thing. LabKey developed much of it, along with a partner who worked on the mobile app side of things. It's all open source, and you know, as of the beginning of September, the FDA is actually funding LabKey to support this. So if you want to run a clinical trial observational study using mobile devices, you should talk to us. This is a free open source system. We can support you to a certain extent. Talk to us if you're interested. I already mentioned the primate research centers that use LabKey for primate EHR purposes. They had a great collaboration meeting yesterday. And you know, even if you don't need to manage primates in your instance of LabKey Server, just understand that a lot of the work they have done and funded has helped the platform, you know, in areas like the ETL, and I mentioned the ODBC connector, and performance and study management. A lot of their contributions have gone back into the platform to make it better for everyone. Panorama Partners Program. This is a collaboration with the McCoss Lab, focused on targeted mass spectrometry, integration with Skyline. We've done many improvements there. I think they also had just had a kind of a meeting during the roundtable. Sounds like a very successful meeting. And new with that program is that we're adding premium functionality there as well, where LabKey is funding new capabilities there in addition to what the community is sort of contributing. All right, so biologics and sample manager. So I'm not going to say a lot about those because that's why we have Bernie and Hannah to present. What I'm just going to say is that we're very pleased to announce that they are kind of expanding their roles here at LabKey. So they've been technical account managers. Basically, you know, I'll just say they've been with us each for about 5 years. Hannah technically was paid by Seattle Children's Research for a couple of years there, but it turns out she was a spy the whole time for us. So she's perhaps LabKey's biggest fan. I don't know, we can duke it out for that. But anyway, no, I'm very happy that, so Bernie and Hannah, I think you probably know one or both of them, but you know, they have great background in science. They both have worked as, you know, as research scientists in labs, kind of like you and a lot of the folks you support. And they have this in-depth knowledge of the product from using it and from being technical account managers. And now LabKey has the benefit of getting all of their expertise in designing and leading our efforts with biologics and sample manager. So with that, I will hand it over to Bernie to talk a little bit about biologics.
Thank you, Adam. Now I'm feeling all humbled and touched and moved. Thank you so much. As you said, I'm Bernie Lee. It's wonderful to see all of you and to get to know some new faces. LabKey Biologics is a product that we rolled out a couple of years ago. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, LabKey Biologics is a powerful platform that is supposed to, that it provides a set of tools for biological entity registration, associating samples and assay data with those biological entities, including sequences, helps you manage workflows in your labs and your organizations, and provides tools for this integrated data exploration. Through this nice integrated grid view, because it wouldn't be a LabKey user conference if you didn't see an image of an integrated grid view, and LabKey Biologics does it really, really well. There are a lot of really powerful features within LabKey Biologics, but I've chosen just a couple of them to point out. The entity registration, of course, which I mentioned, mechanisms for capturing your sequences and other molecule information is really important, especially when, especially because in this industry, it's very proliferative. You produce a lot of these. You have to characterize a lot of these things. It can be very difficult to capture that information in a meaningful way, and we provide you tools to do that. We've oriented LabKey Biologics around the experiment, which is, of course, how scientists think and plan, and we have goals to make those groupings more meaningful, easier to find and explore. And of course, an area that we've recently made a number of improvements in is entity and sample lineage. We provide tools for you to define the lineage of your samples and entities, and then we provide you visualizations for exploring those, as well as the query tools to, when you've selected a promising candidate, you can then track that back to the original the original parent sample. That might be a patient, it might be something that you designed yourself. Whatever that may be, we've provided you the tools to keep track of the derivation and lineage of those samples. Those are particularly important. I mean, I guess I've already alluded to those to some degree, but of course, ensuring uniqueness of the sequences and biological entities that you are exploring and try to determine whether they are useful candidates for therapy or something else can be quite challenging. We provide you a mechanism to link that to your analytical data and make those decisions. What is best? Why? How do I show that to the people that care? As I mentioned, meaningful groupings of data, scientists think in experiments. When you're going back to draw your conclusions from those experiments, to draw the new ones, it makes much more sense to think about that in the terms that you're used to, as opposed to seeing all of your samples, all of your biological entities, and all of the associated assay data. And then lastly, the sample lineage. That derivation history really does direct your decision making and future processes, and so our goal has been to provide you with tools to improve that candidate selection. I wanted to give a really quick overview of some of the things that we've done recently in biologics. I selected fewer things than Adam did, and so hopefully you can keep them in your brain. We recently added an improved quality control workflow for assays within LabKey Biologics, and actually everywhere. That's another example of how things that we develop for LabKey Biologics fall into LabKey Server as well. But it's a nice workflow for assigning states to the assays associated with the various entities that you're tracking through LabKey Biologics. We created a nice reports page, and we are gradually adding different types of reports to that you can access in a very user-friendly manner. We improved the way that we handled degenerate bases. When you are dealing with sequences, not everything goes right. Sometimes you get slightly different sequences each time you do your sequencing, and we have improved the way that we deal with interpreting codons. And then, of course, there is our lineage graph improvements, of which there are many. And for more details on this, our one and only Kevin Krause will be talking a lot about this in his presentation tomorrow. But we, as you saw in Bo's presentation, there is now a nice sample information sidebar next to the lineage graph. We added some additional actions you can perform on those graphs and made it much easier to explore related samples. We have plans. We are not going to stop building and improving on LabKey Biologics, in particular because we keep getting wonderfully constructive feedback from everyone who uses it and everyone who thinks about it. We just concluded a wonderful group meeting for some existing biologics users, and as usual, they provided some wonderful constructive feedback to us. So some of our plans include improving the usability of the product. In this case, and as you'll see in Hannah's presentation, there are a number of wonderful features listed here, including new designers for sample sets and assays and some of the interactions therein that we have improved in our designs for Sample Manager that we're going to build into LabKey Biologics. We are also constructing some unique reports for querying across samples and through lineage so that you can better make comparisons within experiments. And lastly, some user experience improvements in regard to navigation and grid controls, providing you the ability to do concurrent imports of sequences and molecules, which, if you don't do biological therapeutic research of some kind, maybe that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it can be a headache to be forced to do things in lots of steps when they make sense as a single one. There are a lot of common sample actions that we have now enabled, and lastly, of course, we have the goal of providing meaningful exports of grouped data from LabKey Biologics. So with that, later, after Hannah gets a chance to go, I'd love to talk about LabKey Biologics with anybody who's interested or has questions. Thanks for your time. And I will hand it over to Hannah to give you a nice walkthrough of LabKey Sample Manager.
So as Adam sort of talked about, I feel like I've had a hype team for the last several weeks sort of talking about this for Sample Manager, but really, in reality, I inherited this, and I'm so happy to be able to be the product manager for this. But what I'm going to show you today has been almost a year and a half of effort on the developer side, and so really I kind of want to shout out to them, and all of the things that I get to demo today are really because of their hard work. And so I'll sit up here and take all the credit, but really they've done a lot of it. So it's been wonderful to be able to show this to you guys today. So just to sort of initiate you to Sample Manager, if you haven't heard one of us at LabKey talk about it already, we're sort of designing this feature-rich sample management application that's really designed to bring greater efficiency to your processing while providing this unified view of samples and related data. And so something that we really wanted to focus on for this product is sort of this built-to-purpose application that is really a standalone product. So most of you today are already using LabKey in some way, but sort of the idea of this is if there are people that you know or clients that are coming to us and saying, hey, we really want just something really minimal and we don't want to go through this ramp-up effort, we would be able to provide them with that standalone product. And then also creating something that's really easy to use and ramp up within the lab, because I experienced this myself working at Seattle Children's as a spy, apparently, that it is really hard to get adoption in the lab, and sort of you really have to sell that. And so that was something sort of at the core of this product for us, is that we wanted it to be easy enough for people to use and understand, to be able to really just start using it in the lab without a lot of interaction with me or Bernie as account managers. And so again, sort of that emphasis is to facilitate lab work rather than hinder or just sort of stop it, and enable that structured data management of the sample data. So why did we decide to focus on Sample Manager? There's a lot of other ways that we could have gone this last year. We have heard from you guys and other clients that aren't here that current products in this space are really hard to use. They tend to be expensive, sometimes really difficult to deploy and administer in these sort of larger enterprise level systems, and they're ugly. It's not, I'm not ashamed to say it, they're not very pretty. So it was something that we at LabKey wanted to build Sample Manager to have that ease of use and adoption for laboratory folks, designed to facilitate that work, making it a little bit more affordable for people to be able to start using, and then really being flexible. And that's something that we've heard a lot over and over from users, is that we really want to be flexible because people want to use this while also providing structured data capture. So the key features of Sample Manager today are sort of around sample definition and capturing lineage of those samples. It's something that we were able to borrow from LabKey Biologics, which is great. Connecting that assay data to samples directly, and then this sort of new idea that we'll talk a lot about of a task-based workflow. And that sort of workflow word is really kind of an it word, and so it probably means a lot of different things for you guys, but we'll go over that in my demo. So I also get the opportunity to sort of do a live demo today, so this will be really fun. And sort of the way that I structured this demo is sort of I have a lab that is receiving samples from different projects, and I'm following sort of relatively standardized procedures and performing these 3 different assays on them. I can generate children and so sort of decide to do work and then add assay data if I want. And this is just sort of setting you up as one of the use cases that we might support here in Sample Manager, but definitely not exclusively these use cases. So we'll see if I can, it might not let me switch. Okay. And then I'm also just gonna reinitiate here because it probably locked me out. Okay, so this is the Sample Manager dashboard, and really designed here is to sort of help you know what's going on within your lab at that given time. And this is, these are the samples that I've created in this system. If I sort of had been using this in the last year or month or something, if I toggled between these, we'd probably something different. If I do something like today, I've actually been here not creating any samples, and so you see nothing. But really the samples that I created were pretty much all at the same time. So this isn't particularly interesting, but sort of allows people to see what's going on in the lab at that given time. I can also sort of click on these and go into those sample types directly. And then also toggling between samples, and then also perhaps I'm more interested in the assays that are being performed on a given day or a given week. We've really sort of tried to design this dashboard to be able to allow people to understand what's going on, but then also perform work right away. And so part of these are sort of creating the samples directly from this dashboard. And then if I'm toggling sort of in my recent assay data, I'd be able to import data directly into those assay types as well. One of the things that is going to just be a partial demo today that I'll sort of talk through a little bit is this very exciting sort of right-hand panel of jobs and workflow jobs. And so if I had been assigned a workflow job, this would be in my queue, sort of letting me know that I actually have work to do and sort of allowing me then to navigate through that. And it's shocking I don't have any work to do, but we'll probably get there. And so you can see then, like, toggle through and look at all of the active jobs that are happening within that lab at that time. And sort of that's sort of the dashboard view of it. Before I sort of go into detail, I wanted to go through the definition of new samples. And so some of you may be already familiar with this through either using sample sets in LabKey Server or samples in biologics. You can manually enter sample information through the system, doing bulk insert with similar fields, or uploading just a tabular file. And so this has really been advanced in Sample Manager and now in LabKey Biologics as well, and sort of allows you a lot more flexibility in editing what that data is before you're generating those samples. We are also sort of enforcing these unique sample definitions, so not only generating a row ID that's sort of not human readable, we're generating these human readable IDs that might be helpful for when you're sort of talking to people in your lab about what sample you're referring to or group of samples. And so I'll now just toggle back here and sort of show you what that looks like. So I can create samples at this point and select the type of sample that I want to create. And I've got sort of an example. Oh, it did not switch here. Why didn't it switch? Maybe this? Yes, okay. So I'll go back. And sort of, so if I wanted to create samples, I would be able to do it from this dashboard. There's a variety of other places I could do it as well. But choosing sort of the sample type that I would like to create samples for, I've got a blood data set just on my desktop here. And I could sort of add rows individually. And sometimes, you know, if I'm doing it one at a time, if I'm receiving samples and sort of adding them in, this might be a really good case where I can just type stuff in. I can always overwrite sort of the generated ID that I've set the system to have if I choose to do that. I can also perform a bulk insert here. So maybe all of these samples, I know maybe I'm creating 10 of them, maybe I'm creating 100. They're all coming from the same project. Maybe they at least have a similar start date. I'll sort of start there. I sort of have an anticipated volume that I'm going to get 10 mils of blood, and be able to fill this out in bulk and then add these rows to a grid. And then at this point, I'd also be able to sort of change this as I'm looking at the samples and saying, actually, this draw date was today instead. And being able to sort of make those changes on the fly, I think is really powerful. And yep, this first row, you can see that was my original row. Okay, this is this is why live demos don't always work. But I do actually have a file import that I know works because I tried it yesterday. So we'll do this. And I'll just drag my blood samples here. It's going to give me a little preview of what I have to make sure that this is, yes, the file that I intended to upload. And now I can finish that off and it sort of creates it for me. So the other, this did actually switch here, great. So capturing sample lineage, we've talked about now a few times. Kevin will be talking about it a lot more tomorrow. But being able to automatically capture that lineage during sample registration, we've sort of enabled that functionality when you're creating a sample set, which I'll go through in a second. And then you can also later add it as sort of a bulk update or even a single update to a sample to say, okay, well, I didn't know the parent at the time that I created it, but now I want to either create parents or even sort of children from those samples. And then the lineage view that we saw from Bo earlier today, really you can sort of view and interrogate the lineage of your samples in either that graph form that he showed, or you can toggle over to a grid form if you need to view that a little bit more structured. And so toggle back and forth here again. And so what I thought might be helpful is actually showing you guys what creating a new sample type looks like. And again, we can do this in a variety of different ways in the app. I'm just going to click on my sample sets and go create. We haven't fully transitioned the sample set to sample type naming yet, but we will get there. And let's say that I actually want to create some plasma samples. And these plasma samples I already know come from blood. My name expression here is something that I can change. S isn't very indicative to me of a plasma sample, so I might just change this to plasma, and then it's going to auto-generate that remaining unique ID for me based on the date and the number of samples that I've imported each day. And so to get that parent in sort of automatically, I would be able to tell the system, I'm going to have a column in my data set here that is called blood sample, and that's going to tell LabKey where the parent is coming from, and then say that that parent is coming from the blood sample set. So really what LabKey is then doing is looking for that matched parent to be able to create that lineage for you. And so I can add some custom fields here, and I have just a little notebook to make sure that I'm not going to be typing them in incorrectly. And now you get to see this new designer in action, which is really exciting. We'll just remove this. Yep. Okay, and so then if I drag in my file of plasma samples, I'm going to create plasma samples again. I'm not going to try and do it on the fly because that seems to be working only so far. And if I select this importer, I can drop in my plasma samples again. It's going to sort of tell me what the file is that I'm importing. I haven't assigned names to these samples. I want the system to generate those for me. And you can see that I do have a column called blood sample. And so if I finish here, I'm able to then look at the plasma samples that I just created. If I drill into one specific sample, we call this sort of our sample overview, I'll be able to see the metadata that's surrounding that sample that I just imported, as well as toggling to the lineage. And you can see now that I've got this connection between blood 100 and this plasma sample that I just created. One cool thing about the lineage is that now at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I've created other things from blood 100. I can select this here and actually sort of view then this lineage in the grid and see that, oh yes, that's right. I created a bunch of PBMCs which generated isolated DNA samples as well. And so that's sort of what we mean by this advanced lineage viewer that we've done this year. And so connecting assay to data samples, I'm not actually going to show this. I think most folks here have sort of seen what that looks like, at least in LabKey Server. I think besides sort of that improved UI and flexibility and sort of adding sample or adding assay data directly to those sample IDs, that's not something that we've sort of altered too much here. But you are able to sort of attach assay data to samples in a variety of different ways. You can either do that as part of a workflow job, which I will get to in the next slide, or independently of a workflow job. And what we are sort of changing here is that there will be a required sample ID field. So Sample Manager will want to know what sample is this data associated with. In LabKey Server, that's not something that we sort of have that requirement for, but we really wanted to enforce it for ease of use for people as they were uploading data, realizing that, yes, this is a sample-centric view that we're really focused on. And so now to sort of this more nebulous idea of designing these task-based workflows. Really, we have 3 different levels of this. One of the things that we're implementing right now is creating workflow templates to allow you to reuse those workflows in a lab. And so that would allow you to say, okay, every time we receive a blood sample, I want you to do X, Y, and Z. And then you can sort of instantiate that workflow template across workflow jobs, which is what we've been sort of talking about prior to this. And each of those jobs, then you can assign every task in the job to a user in the system. You can also assign overall due dates of that workflow job, or just due dates specifically for that task if it sort of spans maybe a week or multiple weeks or sometimes months, which is really sort of painful. And then each workflow job is really designed to capture all the tasks that were performed in that job, the samples that were associated with that workflow, and the assay results that were associated with that workflow and set of samples. And so if we actually configured it to be able to add assay data for that workflow, we'd be able to see it there. And sort of this will be my last jump into the product. But if I go back and look at my active jobs, I've got my blood receipt and CBC that I want myself and Susan to perform. And so the UI to actually create these workflows isn't available yet, but we do have sort of this viewer where you can see I've created, myself as an administrator has created these 3 different tasks that I want people to do. If I jump into these samples, I've assigned these 12 or so samples into this workflow job. And I would be able to see sort of that CBC assay data associated with those samples in that job here in this viewer as well. So some of you might be thinking at this point, how can you get Sample Manager? So all of our premium edition subscribers are going to get this module as part of their distribution, either upon launch or maybe in 20.1, depending on how we decide to distribute it. And then any new to LabKey or current community edition users would be able to purchase Sample Manager as a standalone hosted product. So that standalone product will be hosted by LabKey, and if you need it not to be hosted by LabKey, that is a very compelling reason to go to Professional or another edition. One of the things we wanted to focus on for this group that most of you already are LabKey users is sort of what is different between this product and the LabKey server platform. Sample Manager, as I've mentioned before, is really focused on creating this built-to-purpose application, which means that we're going to provide sort of limited, hopefully like varying, but limited use case scenarios for this. So it's not going to be as extensible as LabKey Server, and then also focus really on sharing data within a team. And so LabKey speak for that is we are deploying this in one container, and there's not going to be sort of advanced permissioning of there's this container and then a subfolder that has hidden data that some people can see and some people can't. And LabKey Server, of course, is going to continue to focus on allowing for all of the different applications that we even saw today in our talks, partitioning and sharing that data, and really supporting sort of enterprise-level research. And the modules and features are the things that we talked about already in Sample Manager. Sample types, assays, and workflows are really going to be the main modules that we're using for this. That's going to be enabled in the application. And then LabKey Server will continue to have those things, as well as sort of advanced assays and transformation scripts, collaboration, study management, extensibility, all the things that you know and love about LabKey Server. And so what's available now? Well, this demo is available on my local computer here. We also have the product showcase tomorrow, and there's 2 different sessions for that. I think we'll jump into deeper dives of the demo if you want to see sort of what that assay data upload looks like, or how you might navigate within the application. We'll have that sort of available, and then any Q&A that folks have as well. And then a hands-on with Sample Manager. I think there's going to be a sign-up tomorrow sort of at the front desk where you can have a 15-minute slot with Matt and sort of go over some user testing for us to see, like, have we done things sort of as well as we hope we have. And then also sort of talking to us about it. Either your account manager or somebody here at LabKey, just please share with us what you want, because that's, as both Bernie and Adam mentioned, that's how we're sort of growing all of our products. We're hoping to launch by early 2020. I'm hoping on the earlier side of early 2020, and we'll probably have that date nailed down fairly soon. Those features that we went through today are going to be available at the initial launch, with several more things to sort of come throughout the year. One of those big priorities for me is sort of creating a complete within app experience for users. And I think particularly for those of us who have used LabKey Server for a long time, going into the admin console is not so scary. Probably for a brand new user, that's a big shift in that experience. And then adding some collaboration tools. We've heard a lot about sort of freezer management and integrating that as a component for Sample Manager. And then also sort of further integration with LabKey Server, and that's where a lot of you will come into play to sort of help us know what direction we should take from that. And then in addition to that, any other things that you might have to share. So I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but yeah, if there are questions. Yeah.
It's all very exciting. And on top of it, I guess, so from the researcher standpoint, when you get in, you said the new sample, but in different batches, collecting it all into one, and then going through to this group, but prioritizing use of sample if it's like a precious sample. Have everybody put in their request up front? Then do you have the actual amount of samples to run and all that?
Yeah, we don't have a mechanism now to sort of have volumes set in terms of like we are diminishing those volumes for you in Sample Manager. And requesting is something that we actually talked about yesterday in the pack in terms of we don't want to actually assign a workflow. I just want to request that maybe that gets done and then track the answer of that. And so definitely something that we're considering for the future. Other questions? Okay, you'll come find me later.
Thanks, Anna.